On today's podcast, we're going to focus on transitioning into a new program and beginning your leadership of a new program. And joining me to discuss that is the head football coach, two-time state champion, over 300 wins in his career, the head coach at Brownsburg High School, John Hart. John, great to have you here today.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be on.
Well, Coach, the transition for you into head coaching happened at a very young age, and high school football America identified you as potentially the youngest head football coach in the history of high school football. You started as a head coach at 22 years old. Tell us a little bit about how that opportunity came about.
Whenever I was going to college at Eastern Illinois, which is yes, they're famous for having coaches come out of that place. When I was there, my head football coach from high school had moved to Charleston High School, and he called me as soon as he took the job and said, "Hey, I want you to come work for me." And I was a junior, actually a sophomore in college, and I started coaching for Verlin Myers, who's a Hall of Fame football coach in the state of Illinois. And learned a lot from him and Bill Munkin, who I think also is a Hall of Fame football coach. That great line of Munkin coaches, and it just kind of took off from there, and that's how it got started.
So, Coach, at 22 years old, you had to be excited. I'm sure there was a ton of enthusiasm for you. But as you got into being a head coach, what were some of the things that you figured out right away that maybe you had to develop a little bit more, or things that were challenges for you?
When I took the job at Edwards County High School in Albion, Illinois, they had went, I think, 2 years without winning a game. One of those years, they'd only kicked a field goal. So it was virtually, and Coach Myers tried to talk me out of taking the job, but it was virtually the worst job in the state of Illinois at the time. And I think it's the only reason why a 22-year-old gets a chance. And they were building a new school, so all 9 of our games my first year were on the road. So there were so many obstacles. They didn't have a weight room. We didn't have a coaching staff. And I think the staple of the 6 programs we've taken over, we've tried to be better than all of our opponents, and really, hopefully, anybody in the state. And now we're competing nationally, is that our off-season program gives us a chance to win every ball game, no matter the level of talent. So I've been a head coach 36 years. The last 32, we've only had 1 year where we didn't have a winning record, and it was 4 and 6.
So, looking at that aspect of your program, certainly everybody wants that. A lot of people say that, right? That we're going to outwork our opponents. We're going to do it better than our opponents. How have you been able to, I guess, make that something that when you say that, that's probably, looking at the track record, that's probably true? What are the things that really go into it for you guys that, make that statement tangible? I don't read a lot, but if I do read, it's always about something in the world that pertains to me. So I spent a lot of time either at colleges or doing research about off season. And I kind of started when Coach Myers was kind of the first person or the first coach to kind of really start off season programs of anybody in our area at the time. So I knew then that was the first thing I would have to do, and I had to teach myself. I didn't, we really didn't have back then, strength coaches, and you didn't have a great resource, to kind of learn from. So you were kind of, back then, I think we used bigger, faster, stronger, just because I didn't know anything else, and I could read it. But now today, everything's as much about speed and explosiveness as it is, strength itself. So that developing comes in a lot of different areas, and let alone team bonding. It's funny you bring up BFS. I think a lot of us, who coached, got their start back around that time that you did.
somehow came upon BFS. I mean, at the time, those guys were just doing a great job. It really helped you organize your weight room, get a lot of kids through, track things. I think more than anything, I thought the programming was really good, but more than anything, I thought the organization is really what helped coaches and programs get the maximum out of their off season.
You know, that's a great point. So with all the technology and stuff we have here at Brownsburg, and we are the tip of the sword. I mean, it's pretty amazing some of the things we do, and we have, and there's actually 3 of us in the weight room full time. We have about 650 athletes come in a day.
Wow.
And that's without after school. So we train everybody, but the technology and stuff was so advanced, but we constantly talk about the fact, and we have about 11,000 square feet weight room. It looks like a college weight room. But when we were kind of in a dungeon, we were still getting results. And it really comes to exactly what you said. It's tracking, setting goals for players, and it's everything Bigger, Faster, Stronger did. Now, I think there's some elements that obviously makes, other programs a little more advanced than BFS is, but it's really the same principle. You're changing your sets all the time. You're cycling and breaking records.
Yes, and I think at the high school level, it becomes a little bit challenging because, we all go out and we aspire to do what some of these colleges do. We got to remember that a lot of what they do is designed for athletes who are farther along in their development, and maybe they do work longer cycles. And I found, especially at the high school level, those shorter cycles work for a number of reasons. I think first and foremost, the intrinsic motivation. You have that kid, especially as you start a program, and I can remember this at a couple programs we were at. They hadn't really had a good program. They would show up, weight room would be open. They'd show up. It was very disorganized, and now all of a sudden you provide this program, very organized. They start to track their things, and the short cycle, the way the old BFS program worked, really those guys started to see gains right away. And what brings you back to the weight room is progress. And so compared to the longer cycle, I think really works, especially as you're saying in those programs that you're taking over and transitioning into.
There's no doubt, and like I said, we have we use an elite form system now that came out of Nebraska, and there's so much technology in what you do now that it's fun. It makes the off season. You hear a lot of coaches talk about burnout. I think I'm a little bit on the opposite part of it. Is that I think if you're tracking and setting goals, it kind of feels like football season all the time. You're just going in a different direction and developing athletes.
Well, Coach, moving ahead now and looking at where you're at Brownsburg, a program now there's high expectations there. You've gone from being a coach who can come in and turn programs around, and now, it's really about sustaining success. I think sometimes that becomes a challenge as well. You get a target on your back. You can fall into the trap of, well, this has been working for us forever. We're going to stick with this no matter what. How do you balance, that idea of this is what's worked with maybe staying top on some of the cutting edge things and figuring out how those might fit into your program?
When they hired me here at Brownsburg, and we'll kind of talk about expectations for me in a interviewing process. Whenever I'm, like I said, I've been a head coach of 6 different programs, and other than the first job, I really was satisfied with the job I was at. I loved the job I was at. Then you have opportunities, and then you decide whether you want to take those opportunities or not. But Brownsburg had kind of been in a void. They'd had 3 straight losing seasons. And to be honest, our schedule was of smaller schools than us, other than our conference. In the 5 years we've been here, I think we've won at least 7 games every year. We
We beat St. X on ESPN. We've beaten Ben Davis 2 years in a row from one of the national prominent schools here in Indianapolis. So really what our goal was is, as we flip things, is that we kind of put a timetable on things. And the first thing that I put the timetable on is numbers. And if you're going to compete in big school football here in the state of Indiana, really anywhere, when you're competing against schools of 3,000, numbers become the first thing. And our numbers had gotten pretty low as far as, football players. So our first thing we did is we recruited the hallways really, really hard. And we tried to get every kid to come out that could possibly have interest. And then, the next goal was setting clubs in our weight room and trying to get those clubs at a number that would allow us to win championships. Then you try to, get that staff that has specialties and everything where you can coach at a really, really high level, because, man, the coaches the people don't know Indianapolis football. It is some of the most competitive football in the country. And I know people from Texas and Florida, maybe Ohio, maybe don't understand that. But if you look at the number of Division I athletes that come out of just the city of Indianapolis, I think Sports Illustrated ranked it as the number 2 metropolitan area for recruiting at one time.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of good football there, having, been there just about monthly the last 4 years as I had worked for USA Football. Some really good coaches there too that I've been able to meet. Focusing on a couple things, I got a couple follow-up questions on things you highlighted there. First of all, the clubs. Talk to me a little bit about the clubs that you set up in your training program.
And I think it varies on the size of the school. Like my son is the head coach at Gibson Southern down in Southern Indiana and has flipped that program. So his boards were a little less, so you get more names on the board than what ours is. And so I think you have to adjust that so you have goals, because you want to fill that board up. If you don't fill that board up, it looks like you're not progressing much. So right. So for us, it's 200 bench times 10, which equals out to be 255 if you do it on that scale. So that's the very first board everybody tries to get on. And we'll average about 36 kids on there a year. And then the second board that we really are big on is the Power Clean of 235. And again, we'll average about 35 kids on that a year. So those are the first 2 clubs that we try to get everybody on. Then the 400 squat. So now you've gotten all 3 of the major core lifts. And that's what we tell kids. We want that balance. That we don't want somebody on the 400 squat that can bench 225. Everybody should be really close in those numbers. So that total is the 935 club that we really try to get as many people in as we can. And we're going to hit somewhere between 15 and 20, but we'll really gauge. And again, Brian Neese, I think, is one of the best strength coaches in the country. He's really always looking for that balance, and so that it's close in all those numbers. And then the last big one is the 300 bench, and we'll only average maybe 8 to 10 kids on that 300 bench. But those are our set of clubs, and our goal is to always hit 100. So our kids know, hey, and we kind of set that standard. You can't win a state championship without 100 clubs in big school football, and it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, I love that idea. I think you make a very important point. And just thinking back to my days as a head high school football coach and some of the things we did is you're 100% correct. Is you kind of got to tailor that to where that school's at. When you go in, and we're going to get into your talk, at least the beginning of it, about this transition into a new program. But I think when you look at the beginning of what you're doing, you really need to think about exactly what you said. How do we fill up that board? It's a motivational thing, right? It's in the player's psyche. I mean, if you go through months and nobody's on that board, it kind of becomes a demotivator. Geez, we're not going to be very good. And I can remember back to a program we took over, really had to start from square one. Things had kind of gotten away from everything that was going on there. And, not a great weight room, but we made the most of it. What we focused on first with so many kids that first year, and we took over late, but that first year who, we're playing varsity with almost a JV team and, freshmen playing, sophomores playing, not a single one of them playing because they were ready to play varsity. It was just out of need. So our first focus became what does a varsity athlete look like from a strength and speed and conditioning perspective? And we built our boards around that. So that was the first thing. And our colors at that school were red and black. And for whatever reason, that black color was the one they liked a lot more. They liked, black gear, the black helmets, et cetera. So, for our athletes, we kind of designated the red as if you were varsity ready, you were going to be on that board. And when we hit practice in, we've got to do some stuff in June. When we hit practice in June, you would have a red jersey. And your goal, though, was to get that black jersey on. So the black jersey kind of was maybe more along the lines of what you were talking about, of those kids that you want 100 of. But we knew at the beginning, we just got to get some guys ready to be varsity athletes. They're not all state. They're probably not all league, but just be ready to be on the field. So I think that's just a very important point, is that you kind of tailor it to your situation, and you got to understand, and whether you're a first-time head coach or it's the second or third program you walk into, past success at another place doesn't automatically mean that it's going to be a plug and play, and that's going to replicate itself. That there's a lot of thought that has to go into that particular program.
There's no doubt. I love the black jersey idea. I think Nebraska kind of did that with the black shirts, and a lot of us were kind of simulating that program at the time.
Yes, and so looking at that, Coach, I know your whole talk is going to be on developing a program, and we're kind of getting into this whole idea of a transition, right? So, along those lines, when you're taking over a program, what are some of the first things you start to look at to figure out the direction and the work that you're going to need to do early on? I mean, to have success in August, September, October, November, what you do in those early days of your transition is important.
Even before that starts, one of the things that I've done in the last 3 jobs that I've been at is, and again, I really didn't apply. It was they had interest in me, and it kind of started that way. So it may be different for different people, and especially young guys who are trying to make their name. But as soon as we kind of got through the first part of, hey, am I interested in this job? And we can go into that if you want later. But once we get down to the bare bones, and before I'm ready to accept the job and stuff, I always ask them, hey, you guys have asked me about my commitment. What's your commitment? And most administrators don't have an idea of what a commitment to win at a football program is. And, we live in Indianapolis, so the Indy 500 is big. And I said, in a lot of sports, it's like if somebody wins a dirt track national championship, it's a very exciting time for the people that's involved in that. But if you just race in the Indy 500, it pales to comparisons. Just race it. You don't even have to win it. And I said, and to win it is another commitment. And to be in that, in that ability to win it. So I always kind of start off with that. What is that commitment? And I go, if you're trying to win, the dirt track championship, I'm probably not your guy. If you want to be involved in the Indy 500, I'm probably not your guy. If you want to say we're going to win the Indy 500, then I'm probably that guy. And we've only won it twice in 36 years, and we've struggled in the playoffs since we've been here the last 5. But our teams are ranked in the top 2 or 3. We're one of the teams, I think, every year people think we have. If you were to pick a couple teams who you think could win it, we're always in that discussion. And really, in high school football, you could almost pick 4 teams, maybe 6 at the start of the year, and you're going to be right about 99% of the time who's going to end up in that state championship game. And every once in a while, one comes out of the from way back, but for the most part, it's people and programs who have gotten through a process. And I think Dabo Sweeney is a guy that all of us could look at and go like, that guy wasn't winning national championships when he just didn't put on his coaching shoes and win a national championship. Took over a struggling program, and then he got it to being a program that could compete, and then made it an elite program. And it is a process, and you don't jump just to elite. You might do it one time, but then you're going to fall back off. And I think as you start a program, you look about how are we going to win at a high level all the time. And it kind of starts with that commitment by the school. And for me, the commitment is what are you going to do to make us different than the people we play with and compete against? I had a phone call one time, and it was actually another school from here in Indianapolis that had been struggling and was looking to turn their program around. And I asked them about that commitment, and then I just picked out the 4 best teams in the state of Indiana, and I said, if you guys are interested in me, you better look at those 4 programs and understand I'm going to want every single thing those 4 programs have: the number of coaches, the facilities, the everything that takes to win a program. And I think, in my opinion, if you come in with that, then you're not fighting it all the time. And man, there's a lot of coaches that get out because they're just tired of the fight with the community or the admin about what it takes to win. I think most of us know what it takes to win. It's whether you kind of you're ready for that process for your program to win.
I know that's a tough one, especially for new head coaches to focus on those kinds of things. You get excited about the opportunity to take a job, but very important questions and things to learn right off the bat. And I think an important point too. So as you go in there, where do you aim to be? What's it going to take? And sometimes you might be taking over a program that initially, let's say it is a number of coaches, maybe they can't provide it, but they can provide a path to that. Like, there certainly could be that. I think you have to have some realistic expectations of where you're starting, but I think to your point, they better be along you with that and find a way. If we can't have it now, how are we going to get it? Because that's what it's going to take. And I think many times, and I've made that mistake before, so excited to take a job that we don't do that work or don't have those conversations. And then, like you said, down the line, there's frustration, not just on your side, but maybe even on the other side as well.
Well, yeah, because when they hire you, they expect results, but lots of times they don't understand what it takes to get the results. I'll give you a good example. When I was at Evansville Wrights, we had the same amount of coaches at every city school. Well, we were expected to win at a really high level. We were kind of that flagship school, and we split revenue for Gates anytime we played another EVSC school or Evansville school. Well, when we came in and we drove up the numbers, when we started out pretty low, around 60 varsity players and maybe 20 or 30 freshmen, to about 80 freshmen and 110 sophomore, juniors, and seniors. Well, now I'm coaching with the same amount of kids as somebody who may only have 40 varsity kids and 20 freshmen. Well, we had to find a way. Well, the EVSC was not going to change their process. So like you said, sometimes you have to create pathways. And one of the things we did, we had the biggest and best golf tournament of anywhere around, and that money went solely to paying coaching stipends. My oldest son was my offense coordinator in the 2 state championships. And he jokes about the fact that he never got paid for the first state championship. He was a volunteer. And so sometimes you got to kind of start that process with selling something that's value to talented people. And for Nick, it was about the opportunity to start coaching. Now, my son Derek is in Kankakee, Illinois, and he was the quarterback, the backup for the first state championship, and the starter for the second state championship. He was the same way. He became an offensive coordinator, and really for the first couple of years, he didn't get paid. You know, you got a house to live in and some food. That was his pay. So sometimes you got to make those struggles, you know, to have the success.
Yes, definitely. Well, I think another aspect of this, Coach, as you get into a program, at some point you really need to look at your competition. And I see this happen all the time where a school will just dominate a league and then bow out maybe early rounds or mid rounds of the playoffs and never really get over that hump to be one of those elite teams time and time again. I think a lot of that goes to the competition, and you know, it's hard to change your league. You know, the league is what it is, but how important is it as you get into a program and you're talking about being one of the best in the state, being, you know, nationally recognized, et cetera, to increase that level of competition?
You know, for us, it's been huge, and I think I've done it every place we've been, where we got into a new league and the competition was, again, at a high level. Now, again, you have to be careful about that because you got to build momentum if you're really down. You know, when we were at Edwards County, Casey, Illinois was the predominant school in that conference and really in the state in 2A football, and they had a Hall of Fame coach. Well, when we got there, it was we started playing those guys right away. And I'll throw out a name only a few will remember, but Jeff Finke, I can still remember that 36 years ago. That's how good that guy was. And we're playing those guys, and we're getting beaten badly. Well, if we'd have played 4 Caseys, I don't think we'd have ever got over the hump. We needed to have a weaker schedule starting out to get to ourselves to where we believed in ourselves to then play, you know, a bunch of elite teams. When we were at Mount Carmel, we started progressing that schedule as we kind of developed as a program. And Mount Carmel has an incredible tradition, but the numbers were starting to fall off. The wins were starting to fall off, so then you got to stir interest in it. But to the point of Brownsburg, we were playing 2 3A teams, and we're a 6A team, or a 3A and a 4A team, and we're a 6A team. We needed that for the first couple of years. Well, like I said, now we play St. X, who was 24th in the country this year, and Ben Davis is our non-conference games, and then everybody in our conference is a school 3,000. I think we're actually maybe the smallest or second to smallest. So playing those other people kind of validates your ability to play at a high level. It doesn't always equate. I can promise you this, you know, like we only won 1 game in the playoffs and this year, but we beat St. X, who was ranked 24th. So sometimes it doesn't always equate, but for the most times, if you're trying to stay at a high level of expectation, then you got to go out and play people that have that same kind of goals. One, so you know you can compete with them when it comes down to the important times.
Yeah, definitely. I can't agree more there. And I know that becomes a challenge. It's something that every coach has to look at. It's something, you know, that's not always an easy one. Your athletic director sometimes, you know, wants to fill that schedule up as quickly as possible. But, you know, you have to take some of those things into account. What is the ultimate goal for us? Where do we want to go with this program? And again, for you, getting it to that elite level, it's going to take a little bit more.
Absolutely. And you know, for us to, as we were kind of stepping up, Jumpman from Nike jumped in on our program just this year. So then you start kind of getting the perks of playing, you know, elite talent. They want us on ESPN. They want to see Jumpman on ESPN. And you got to kind of get to that process. But again, I'll always stay by this. You're not going to drive up numbers, and you're not going to change the weight room if you're in a competition that's over your head in a program that's not used to succeeding, if you're getting drubbed every Friday night, that's not a recipe for success either. So I think there's a great balance, because at Huntley, when we took that program over, who had historically struggled for many years, we went, I think, 6-3 the first year. The first ball game, I'm thinking like, oh my God, what I got myself into. We were not, but by the end of the year, I mean, we're playing and beating teams that were ranked in the state, and so things had changed for us throughout that course of that year.
Well, Coach, you're going to be speaking about all of this in detail and going beyond what we've talked about here at the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association Clinic. It's really the first big clinic of this offseason here, December 8th through the 12th, a virtual clinic. Tell us a little bit more, I guess, about all of the other things you're going to cover in your clinic talk.
Well, we'll get in depth a little bit about our weight program, what we do with Elite Form, and I know not everybody can afford Elite Form, so that'll be a little bit, but also what we do from we try to win seasons, and our first season coming up here pretty soon will be our speed and strength season, which is the month of December, and we really try to drive those numbers up really hard. And again, we have access to some things that smaller schools don't, but it really is the same thing. You can time 20s or 10s in a gym and start showing that speed development, showing that strength development. So we'll talk hard about that. We'll talk about how to start the program, where we kind of started a little bit about the interviewing process and about the expectations, and what I believe it keeps us playing at a really high level at all 6 of the schools we've been at. And I think one of the unique things about the schools that we've turned around, basically the assistant always took over from me after I left, and they succeeded at as high level or a higher level than what we did even as I was there. And I think that tells you that, hey, we built a program. We didn't build wins and losses. We built a program that has some strong values. Hopefully what I share with that will help other people in kind of going. I have numerous guys who have came in and been an assistant for us that have had great success. I talked about my 2 sons, but if you look back at Huntley, Matt Zimmelzak, who took over that job, has done a great job at Huntley, and they're continuously ranked in the state and done well in the tournament. Warren Central won 2 state championships after I left. Evansville Wrights won a state championship after I left, and Mount Carmel, and all those guys had been assistants of mine. And Mount Carmel, Darren Peach, who's a Hall of Fame coach in my opinion, with the 2 state championships after I left. So some of the guys even had more success. So that's the fun part as you make those lifelong friends.
Coaches, you can see Coach's Clinic Talk along with about 130 other coaches, headlined by Mike Loxley of Maryland, Pat Fitzgerald of Northwestern at IHSFCA.coachesclinic.com. I'll put that in our show notes. Your show notes are in your app, the description there. There should be a live link, or you can find those on coachingcoordinator.com. Coach, final question for you I'd like to ask of everybody is, looking at all the things you do over your career, the thing you feel really is that aspect of your coaching that gives your players, your team, the winning edge?
When I was at Eastern Illinois, Dr. Kat Simplis was my instructor. So a lot of the people that graduate from Eastern will remember that name. And the first thing that I think I learned in coaching is you got to have a principle, and you need a great principle. And he spelled how you spell principles, what you believe in, and don't vary off what you believe in, and build it. And you got to work for a great principle. And he spelled an underlined PAL as a principle. If you have those 2 things, you have started the concrete part of being successful as a head football coach and having a great program.
Coach, for our listeners out there, how can they connect with you?
We have BHS football on Twitter, I should say, and also you can email me at jhart, H-A-R-T, at brownsburg.k12.in.us, and I'll share anything and everything I have.
Coach, it's great to talk to you here again. Looking forward to seeing you at the Illinois High School Football Coaches Association Virtual Clinic, and best of luck to you as you get ready for your next season in 2021.
I really appreciate it, man. Keith, what a great lineup that Dave Jacobs and the guys have put together. I'm reading that, I'm thinking like, oh my God, I should be cleaning somebody's garage and some of the names are on there. So it's quite an honor.
Thank you again for listening to the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. Please, if you are enjoying the podcast, head over to iTunes or Spotify and click 5-star for rate. If you have a minute, write a review. It really helps the podcast. Check out our new home for the Coaching Coordinator Podcast. That's at coachandcoordinator.com. And follow me on Twitter at Coach K. Grabowski.